Hi, this is Pat Moorhead, and we are back for another episode of the 6 5 podcast. We are virtually doing the end of event analysis of the GlobalFoundries GTS 2023. What does GTS stand for? It is the Global Technology Summit. Daniel, how you doing, my friend?
Yeah, I'm always happy, Pat, when we have the chance to tear down a couple of really action packed days talking semis, talking about what AI, automotive, getting to the edge, some really exciting partnerships, and of course, really, Pat, pulling the threads, tying together what's going on in the industry and why Global Foundries has had such a successful ascent, especially in the years following its recent IPO.
Yeah, it's crazy, Dan. I remember 10 years ago talking to literally a major business news outlet, top three. And they said, I don't know if we're going to cover chips anymore. My editor doesn't think it's interesting with technology, and I did a massive eye roll. But, as we like to say, chips are eating the world as much as software is. And you can't run that fancy software on air. And then the dark days hit. I'm not going to use the P word 3 years ago,
Well, you
but
don't
I
want to get
think that
censored?
I don't want to get censored, and or some warning underneath our video. But the I think we all learned, even down to the consumer sitting at the dinner table, how important semiconductors were, and it wasn't just the bleeding edge, right? I mean, it was the uh, 12-cent PIMIC that went into the radio of the $100,000 car, right? That was driving people crazy. And then here we are, AI crazy, right? With NVIDIA going off the rails, a lot of the companies that are a part of that ecosystem getting a ton of interest. And literally, I don't know, Dan, have we been at 100 virtual or in-person events since November about generative AI? It's crazy.
Yeah, you make a really good point. And all this AI is only possible because semiconductor companies building everything from the most advanced GPUs to FPGAs and ASICs to, low power sensors that end up pulling
Exactly.
all that data that we need to do all the really cool things that we're hearing about on our, big powerful supercomputers. And so these things are very intertwined. And it's kind of a nice segue, Pat, to
Yeah.
Global Foundries. You talked about that inquiry you had, a decade ago, and it's pretty laughable. I have to imagine that producer is probably unemployed at this point because there isn't really a part of the tech stack that is more readily covered because of its implications on not only technology but national security, global
Yeah.
policy, technology leadership. It's great that you got that SaaS application, but like you said, try running it on air. You can't do
Right.
that. And so, this really interesting inflection here, Pat, comes back to, hey, we live in a world where we need a whole continuum of processes, and every device that we use, whether it's the new iPhone 15, I want to do this so I can check my phone, or whether it's a legacy of automobile or an appliance, is full of semiconductors. And in some cases, you've got these 3, 5, 7 nanometers that everybody likes to talk about, and that's what most of the media focuses on. And then there's the 20, 30 nanometer plus technologies that are still in all of these devices, in many cases doing very important things. And Pat, if you tried to buy a car during the P word, during that time when the supply chain got absolutely annihilated, you may
Yeah.
have heard at some point that the reason you didn't get your car wasn't because they were missing some advanced process chip that was used for something. It was literally some very old legacy bus that might be used to control the adjustments on your seats or something very simple like that. And then literally they could not finish a product.
So, hey, we are doing the end of event coverage for GTS 2023. But for those who may not be aware of who Global Foundries is, man, Dan, can you talk about who the company is and what they do if they're unfamiliar?
Yeah, of course. GlobalFoundries was founded in 2009. It was actually spun off of your old,
Yeah.
stomping grounds. I saw you on CNBC recently. I think it said former corporate fellow AMD. I
I'm
loved it.
never I'm never getting away from that, am I?
Never getting away from that. But that's also an honor. You were one of the youngest ever in that role. Um, but they were founded in 2009, originally a private company. In 2021 became public, but they're one of the world's leading manufacturer of, they position it as essential chips. We could sort
Yeah.
of say there's a few different ways. Sometimes people call it as older process. Sometimes people call it lagging edge. But these are really important semiconductors that are utilized, as I told the story about phones and cars, to basically manufacture almost everything that we use that is electronic or that uses electricity. It's a global company, so it's not
Yeah.
just a name. They have a footprint. Fabs in Singapore, fabs in Europe, in Germany, in the US, big presence in New York and Vermont as well. And they're really well known, Pat, for the work that they do in a number of adjacencies, but auto, which we've hit on, but they work in
Yeah.
the data center, home, and industrial IoT. And then, of course, they're part of smart mobile. And they really like to kind of remind everybody out there that basically there's not a device you can buy that doesn't have some part from Global Foundries.
Yeah, it's a really interesting company. And yeah, it was a spin-off from AMD. There were some acquisitions, and the company really does, I like to call it specialty fab in areas. It's funny. GlobalFoundries does what Intel doesn't, and a lot more. Right. I think that's the simple way that I sometimes explain this to people. So the company had GTS 2023. You and I, gosh, watched, I don't know, 6 hours of video. We were not able to attend, but it's a great show, and it's what you would expect from an ecosystem show, right? We go to a lot of ecosystem shows. Some of them from chip makers, some of them are industry shows, IaaS, PaaS, SaaS providers, and this is their ecosystem show. This is where other OEMs, fabless semiconductor companies, OSAT companies, EDA, IP companies like ARM come in, EDA, like, in fact, the show seemed like it was majorly sponsored by Synopsys and Cadence. So, um, uh,
The companies that do
there,
IP and EDA.
yeah, exactly. And there were a bunch of keynote addresses. They went through their roadmaps, a bunch of demos. We didn't get to see the demos because we weren't there. But gosh, I think I've been to 5 or 6 years of it, and it's pretty awesome. And as you would expect, right? You have headliners, right? CEO Tom Caulfield kicked it off, but the two other headliners were a gentleman that you and I know quite well, Charlie Kawwas, COO at Broadcom. He essentially runs the entire chip business for Broadcom, and John Forsyth, CEO from Cirrus Logic. So the highlights are what you would expect, Dan, in how you position the company, right? They talked about ultra low power technology platforms that they had. And remember, platforms, right, is basically a flow, it's a process, right? RF and millimeter wave connectivity solutions. Charlie hit on that big time, and very localized, low power, intelligent applications with secure non-volatile memory technology. That's another area that they hit. So, talking about exactly what you would expect at an ecosystem event. So, a lot of key themes that it's funny. It's hard to go through 6 hours of videos and maybe walk away with a few themes, but we're going to give it our best shot possible, and really follow the lead of CEO Tom Caulfield. So, Dan, what were some of the themes that you walked away with?
Well, first of all, Global Foundries is among the biggest companies in semis that oftentimes no one's heard of. And I thought it was really important that Tom set the stage of why the company serves over 200 customers, why the company has 13,000 employees, 8 billion in revenue, and 9,000 patents. And I only point
Yeah,
that out because this ties to the first theme, and that's AI. It's very easy in this current market space to anoint a very small number of fabless chip makers as the king of AI, queen of AI, whatever you want to call it.
Well, in fact, there's one that's anointed. Even Tom kind of joked about the definition of AI is NVIDIA. The biggest challenge is getting enough NVIDIA.
Absolutely. But of course, Tom immediately set the stage that, hey, AI is important here too. The
Yeah,
essentials, the specialty, however we want to define this, Pat, is that for AI to fully work, there are these virtuous relationships, and we'll come back to that in a minute between the edge and the cloud. And we'll talk about that more as a theme, because I think that was a theme too. But he
yeah,
really talked at very succinctly about the fact that these essential chips are critical to being able to deliver AI, whether that's AI in a medical device, whether that's going to be AI on your PC and smartphone, whether that's going to be AI in a smart appliance in your home. And then, of course, you've got things like infrastructure and 5G and networks that could be doing things that the silicon diversity that has to exist inside of this infrastructure is substantial. And that while, we all want to think about the high power HPC running the biggest NVIDIA Grace Hopper,
yeah.
we also have to think about the all of the different specialty silicon that has to go inside of those devices that makes these lower power, that drives efficiency, that can enable these systems to connect and network at scale. And so the first thing, Pat, that really caught my attention was, while I didn't feel he over rotated, because a lot of people I do feel right now kind of over rotate to how
Yeah.
important AI is, I think he wanted to say, look, there are not going to be servers built. There are not going to be intelligent automobiles made. There's not going to be a future generation of smartphones that are going to have AI without the supporting cast of essential specialty parts that are going to come from GlobalFoundries. So that, Pat, was my first big trend that I saw from Thomas.
Yeah, and I really liked how he pulled on history. I mean, I love to do that. I love to start with the mainframe and then go all the way, through minis, client server, PC, smartphone, IoT. I loved how he went through that. But what he did is he set up uh, what he called a virtuous cycle, which I wholeheartedly agree. Which is the edge connected to the cloud, and then connectivity in the middle, and then AI adding value on top of that. And that's where, going down to the funnel to see, what's the unique value that GlobalFoundries brings, and why are they really good at it, or why are they better than, let's say, a TSMC or a Tower, right? So, uh, to what you said before, he started with edge intelligence, which was like, all the data, or most of the data that you're going to get, that may or may not be transported, all of it to the cloud, is going to be from the edge. And he has a really good point. And companies like Qualcomm, it's funny, I think him and Intel, GlobalFoundries, Intel, and Qualcomm might be the two companies who are hitting this the hardest. But historically, it's going to happen. I mean, there's more ML today, Dan, on the edge than there is in the data center. So I don't see why generative AI would be any different. You have to connect the edge and the cloud. How are you going to do that, right? Well, enter companies like GlobalFoundries, partners like a Broadcom, right? Integrated RF, right? We always like to say it stops at the modem, but it's the modem plus the RF systems that make this world go around. Oh, by the way, it's not just on a 5G smartphone. Every router, every device that's wireless, that's out there, has to have low power integrated RF, right? Fast switching, right? Dan, you and I talk about going from 5G to Wi Fi to Bluetooth on the same type of device. That is difficult. You and I have talked about millimeter wave, and yes, it does consume a lot more power than, let's say, sub 6 5G. But millimeter wave, not only for 5G, but also for Wi Fi, needs to be the most efficient. And then he did right this just a fact. He wasn't saying, "Hey, it's all about the edge and not about the cloud," but he did talk about the monetization of the hyperscalers and how you and I have talked a lot in regards to, let's say, Broadcom and Marvell about, hey, okay, it's a copper world, but we are going to photonics. GlobalFoundries, I wrote a paper on this. I do consider the leader in foundry for silicon photonics, and whether it's connecting in the data center an accelerator to another accelerator, a rack to a rack, a fleet to a fleet, a fleet to a data center, combining data centers. Silicon photonics is the way of the future, and low power, baby. It has to be low power. So I would say that that second theme, or the second thing that came in, was talking about the virtual cycle between the edge and cloud, which is connected by networking and enhanced by AI.
Yeah, I think that's a good one, Pat. And, you probably couldn't have an event like this in a world that's so focused on meaningful management of resources without talking about power and sustainability.
Yep.
Now, I know you and I, we get flustered at times with the sort of market washing that can take place with sustainability. The
Right.
chip industry is different because what it's able to design, when it's able to put lower power into these devices and literally elongate the battery life, for instance, of your phone or of a different device, this is creating meaningful. Remember, there's billions of these devices out there. So
Yeah.
even incrementalism here, small incremental improvements. Now, look, we all saw the Apple announcement, and yes, you and I, a little bit of snon. I said snon, snooze and yawn when it came
Well,
to
that's
like,
good. Can
oh,
I,
great.
by the way, I might use that and not give you any credit for it. A
I would,
snon.
you got to snon, you got to
That's
tap and
awesome.
snon, you tap and snon. But
Yeah.
the, kind of like, oh, they said it's going to last a little bit longer, but you and I actually know that deep down that matters. Like we're
Yeah.
bored because we want the next cool thing that's like next, the Vision Pro, just because it's something to really talk about, right? But when you hear that, hey, Pat, you can get a super powerful laptop with connectivity that's going to last you 24 hours while utilizing all of the typical resources in a day without a charge, that you get that little sweat gland in the back of your neck. You're starting to think, I want that sounds like a computer I want in my bag. And so these abilities for specialty companies like Global Foundries to influence power consumption in these devices is really, really important. It creates lower TCO. It doesn't only drive more efficiency to the device, and it also does help companies meaningfully meet sustainability goals. Because in the end, most companies that are trying to meet the hopefully important parts of sustainability, lowering their carbon footprint, I'm not talking about offsets here. I'm talking about
Yeah.
actually doing things that help lower their impact and emissions, can do this with these kind of incremental items. You have a company of 50,000 employees, lower power PCs, more efficient automobiles in your fleet, lower power phones, data centers utilizing less power. This stuff adds up, Pat. And Global Foundries has a role to play here. And I think Tom made that really clear at GTS this year.
Yeah. I love one of the things that Tom said. It kind of makes your brain like do a second take. Was he talked about the beauty of how important it is when a chip is off. He's like, when it's off, it's off. And he talked about sensors, one that might wake up every, second or so to see if anything's going on, right? Did anybody say anything? Did something happen? If we didn't have these types of sensors, the phone might use 100x more power than it does today to do some of these fancy type features. But I do like, there are companies who greenwash this stuff. And there's companies that actually do something to lower the amount of energy and improve the efficiency. And Global Foundries is one of those. So Tom really capped off his talk, and I thought this was a theme throughout throughout the show. Even Charlie talked about partnerships from Broadcom. But Tom really came in strong ending to talk about partnerships, right? And it's so interesting. We've seen Tom on TV so many times. He gets out there, doesn't he?
And on the six
Uh,
five.
no, totally. Yeah, he's been on the 6.5 a bunch of times, but he talked about partnering first of all for innovation. And Global Foundries actually has co-development with partners where they're not only putting in work, they're sharing some of the IP that comes out of that. That Charlie gave some great examples of that, specifically around the new 9SW RF SOI technology for 5G applications. I thought that was a good proof point. He also talked about economics, like, hey, no longer can one or two companies shoulder the burden, and therefore we're going to share the burden. And there's been a lot of investments of customers, namely the auto manufacturers, who have done some long-term agreements. But if companies like Global Foundries can shoulder some more of the risk than the companies just going in it themselves, that's going to make the world go around. We're in a risk reward type of business, and putting up $10 billion for a new foundry and bankrolling it and having to put down the cash, 3 years before you actually derive any revenue from it is a risky proposition. So I agree with Tom's premise on economic. And then talked about something you and I love, and you and I have been spending so much time on: secure supply chain. Sometimes we call it de-risking China, right? Sometimes we call it other things, but Global Foundries pretty much has a footprint wherever their customers need it. I won't hit the sustainability part again. Dan, you did a great job on that, but I kind of want to end on this partnership theme on something Charlie brought up from Broadcom. He hit many times this open innovation platform, right? Can't be a mainframe, right? How do we get open innovation platforms? I don't know if he was talking about AI. He probably was there, but we can't have any type of mainframe type of platform. By the way, I don't mind mainframes. I kind of like them. And even Tom said all these different things are additive, but I think Charlie, ended where he started, which is open ecosystems require an open platform. And I liked to hear that, and I think that's part of a partnership.
So if I can just add a little bit on a color on this one, I think Global Foundries has really done a good job of uniquely positioning itself as an economic partner to its customers. Now, they've talked about this not just at GTS, but the long term agreement is something that Global Foundries has really specialized in. And while some chip makers and some foundries might be very opportunistic, we all saw how opportunistic TSMC was during the period of time when we had the shortages. Global Foundries really leaned into more predictability, long-term partnerships with companies like GM, where they basically guaranteed important capacity and guaranteed pricing, which, as we know in the chip industry, is a risky proposition, but it does create a certain amount of loyalty and dependency, codependency in a meaningful way between customers and foundry, where Global Foundries may not benefit from those massive margins when they can spike on the surge, but they also don't get hammered when you see these declines. And we've seen how that up and down. And over a period of time, the strategy may really work well for the company because they know they have a guaranteed production volume and price to count on during both the peaks and troughs of the semiconductor industry.
No, that's good. So there were a bunch of no, That was a good ending. I like that.
No, that's good. Yeah. All right. I put you to sleep. No.
Not at all. No, Dan, I'm riveted whenever you say something. I
Oh,
mean, I'm just
thanks.
like
Thanks.
hanging
Too
on to
kind.
every word. I need to put Otter on and record it so I can just
Yep.
steal all
All
your good
right. I got
ideas
you. Just
as my own.
let's go.
Hey, an event wouldn't be an event in tech without doing some major announcements. And there were three major announcements that were packaged up into two big announcement. One was for automotive, and one was for 5G RF applications. Dan, I know you are a car lover here. I don't know if you want to dive into this automotive
Yeah, I think a good
announcements
way
that
to
they
sort
made.
of wrap this recap is to talk a little bit about what was announced. Um,
Yep.
Look, I just got back from the mobility show in Munich. I'm
Yeah,
watching
you
these
did.
trend lines, AI, smarter cities, lower power consumption, sustain all the trends, software defined vehicles, all the trends that Tom Caulfield talked about at GTS were on display in Munich. And GlobalFoundries has a very robust business in automotive. He actually mentioned this, and in case it was a business that was in the low hundreds of millions just a few years ago, and
Yes.
now $1 billion business
Yes.
in this particular space. And why is that? Well, first of all, the volume of semiconductors that are going into vehicles is growing exponentially. We're seeing average vehicles now that might have 1,000 chips in them, a typical
Yes.
ICE, internal combustion engine vehicle. And in these new electrified vehicles, or sometimes they call them ACE vehicles, you're seeing 3,000 chips.
Yeah.
Now, as you're hearing about these companies becoming critical partners, or as I mentioned, long-term agreement for exclusive supply to a company like GM, you have an opportunity for GlobalFoundries to be a massive beneficiary to a trend line like this. And why do I share that? Well, the company did roll out. Now, again, bear with me here because these parts can be a lot to digest, but it's the 40 ES F3 Auto Pro 175 technology. Got that?
Yeah.
You ready to place your order? But in all serious, uh,
I'll take 100 million, please.
it's a extension of the company, what it calls its Auto Pro platform. That's a little more digestible. And it gives the customers a broad set of IP, of technology solutions and manufacturing capabilities that basically speeds up time to market. And why is that important? Let me tell you why that's important. We all know the life cycle and design cycle of a vehicle can be many years. When we've heard companies like NVIDIA and Qualcomm talk about design pipeline in automotive, that often means business 5, 7+ years in the future.
That's right.
But we all know with AI, ADAS, electrification, that there is absolutely no way companies can continue to build vehicles that don't have meaningful software defined feature upgrades that are going to happen on nearly an annual basis. Cars, here's a quote for the day, will be like iPhones. They will get launched 2 times a year and there will be almost no change from the last version, but people will want to buy them anyways. I'm kidding about the no change, but it'll be very incremental. They will be able to make very incremental and continuous changes. We've seen how Tesla has been able to build a very dynamic brand around the ability to constantly change and update. So while the specifics of the announcement are fairly complex, and we will put the release in the show notes if you kind of want to read that off. What is happening is you've got this trend line of shift from internal combustion to electrification. You've got ADAS, you've got telematic systems, navigation, you've got infotainment systems, and you need to be able to build these more like building blocks. And so what GlobalFoundries is announcing with the extension of capabilities to its AutoPro platform gives its OEM partners the ability to move faster in their design cycles in partnership with GlobalFoundries. And I think this is a strong move at an important time to support this rapid growth business for the company.
Yeah, it's amazing how the car has become. I mean, you can look at it as a smartphone, you can look at it as a data center on wheels, but it's a software defined piece of machinery. Some people say, gosh, why do you worry about power as much as you do in, let's say, a smartphone, right? Well, what happens is increased power efficiency means longer range inside of an electric car. And what is I would claim the number one attribute for electric cars is how far you can go on a charge, right? I mean, the difference between 600 and 800 horsepower off the line isn't as much, but it's also keeping people from buying electric cars, right? Because they fear that they're not going to be able to plug in enough. And part of these solutions that they brought out, this an update to their BCD Lite and BCD platform, is to improve power inversion and conversion. It sounds boring, but it's super important, because you might have 5 or 6 different voltages flowing around in that car that need to be regulated. And my take on the Auto Pro update is time to market. I think you had mentioned that, but it's pre-certifying under auto conditions like temperature, um, that enable them to hit time to market 3 years instead of 7 years. I think you had brought in, if I heard you
I didn't
correctly.
say that
So
exact timeline, but I was trying to basically help people understand that right now, when you would partner with a tier one on components and semiconductors, it would typically take 7 or so years, and we're going to see that. My joke, Pat, was it's going to be iPhone cars, meaning every 6 months you're going to get a new one,
yeah,
and we won't get there right away, but that's directionally where we're heading.
wow. I hope it's a lot more exciting than the iPhone
So you're going
launch
to
we
get
just
new
went through.
mirrors that fold a little bit differently. But don't worry,
Yeah,
Pat, you're going to be able to go like this and answer your call while you're in the
I
car.
love that. So hey, the second bundle of announcements were around something that GlobalFoundries is very successful at, and we heard echoing from Charlie Kawas at Broadcom, and that is 5G RF. The company brought in a 9SW RF SOI. By the way, SOI silicon on insulator gives you much better power than what we call bulk, and that's the material that you use as the substrate. And it's funny, I was trying to figure out, hey, what does nine mean? What is nine about? Well, nine is bigger than eight, and eight was what they had before. They had 8SW, and this one is improved 10% smaller volume and 20% enhancement in efficiency. Again, I keep bringing up Charlie, but Charlie told some good stories. Is they co-developed this with GlobalFoundries. By the way, do we know the customers that Broadcom supplies for a lot of their RF stuff? I think we do, and I think they had a big event this week. RF front ends are not just for smartphones, though. They're also for Wi-Fi. They're for Bluetooth. You need an RF front end every time you want to go from digital to analog, and that includes Bluetooth. That's Wi-Fi. That's 5G. The cool part about this goes all the way up to sub 8 gigahertz, and that's some of the fancy new wireless that's coming down the line. Wow, there was a lot in this event, Dan. You
Yeah, there
know?
there really was. And I think it's not only about the event, Pat, but I really think it is about talking about the role that a pure play and an essential partner
Yeah,
has to the entire technology ecosystem. And I so often think it's missed. You started this pod with your story about a conversation 10 years ago. I can tell you I had a recent conversation with a journalist that kind of asked me a question along the lines of, um, do you think it frustrates Global Foundries that they're not more well known? And
yeah,
here's the thing is, I think Global Foundries knows exactly what it's doing. The people that need to know what Global Foundries is know what Global Foundries is. And investors that understand the importance of the continuum of process technologies to make the world work realize how uniquely Global Foundries is positioned, because these fabless companies can't manufacture. The
yeah.
IDMs are putting most of their weight towards leading edge. And the fact is over 80%, Pat, of silicon that's in devices is still higher than 7 nanometers. So if you're a Global Foundries, I'd be saying, I like our prospects. Now,
Right.
it'll never be the headline that, an NVIDIA chip or a Bionic A17 chip is going to give on a day in and day out basis, Pat. But sometimes, I don't know how you feel about this, good business is good business.
Yeah, that's right. You don't always have to be in the big headlines, but when cars aren't shipping and devices aren't shipping because of some of this specialty silicon, you don't want to be in the headlines for that, but you can be. And Dan, something we don't talk about a lot with Global Foundries too is there are a ton of people who still have their own fabs, right? Like Skyworks, as an example, on Semiconductor, Texas Instruments, right? They still have their own fabs, and as you have the combined R&D of Global Foundries partners and themselves who are working with them, you have to ask yourself, hey, when now, to be clear, nobody is a pure play and does all their own silicon. I think everybody does some business with Global Foundries, but you have to wonder how long can the onsemi's, the TIs, folks like that, not be doing all of their stuff in there. And I think what you would do is you would start to see that once Global Foundry starts lapping the competition on its capabilities, and once you start seeing people maybe lose market share because they're not dealing with leading edge. I mean, even Intel as an IDM does 10-15%, maybe more of its silicon at TSMC. So yeah, it's something we don't talk about it a lot, but whatever we discussed on this podcast kind of got my brain moving on the opportunity for Global Foundries. But isn't it wild though? A company like Global Foundries can span not only from the smallest ASIC and controller for IoT to connecting the largest hyperscaler data centers with silicon photonics. It's kind of cool, right? That the variability of and the importance of what the company does.
It absolutely, Pat, makes the company one of the most important names in the business, whether you've heard of it
Yep.
or not. Another great GTS, Pat.
Yep.
Really glad we had the chance to sit down and riff. Got to hear from so many thinkers. Of course, CEO Thomas Caulfield, Charlie at Broadcom. We heard from the CEO of Cirrus Logic, but we also heard from a number of the executives across the Global Foundries family. And there's so much
Yeah.
expertise at the event. So hopefully, this was a great way for you out there to learn a little bit more about what Global Foundries did at this year's GTS. If you like what you heard here on the 6.5, we have a show every single Friday, except for the ones that we don't. And of course, we've got a massive library of executive conversations that we hold at our annual 6.5 summit, or of course at our various 6.5 on the roads. But Pat, for this show, for the GTS wrap up, it's time to say goodbye. Thanks, Global Foundries, for your partnership. See y'all later.